Well, those July tier shifts hit, and dear God, NU is unrecognizable. Not only did we lose every Pokemon we were projected to lose, we actually also lost Magnezone. Which, in some ways, I'm actually really glad, because I had been on record saying I thought Magnezone was one of the more annoying mons in the tier to actually deal with. Not necessarily saying it was broken, but like, oh my god, I hate facing this mon. So, a lot of changes to discuss. We got a lot of drops as well. Some are going to be viewed definitely a lot more negatively than others. We even gave a couple mods to PU. So, you know, I think there's something for everyone in this video. Of course, before we get into it, I'm going to leave you a little reminder. We're trying to hit 10k subs by the end of the year. I can only do that if you subscribe. So, do you like daily uploads? Do you like competitive Pokemon? Do you like Pokemon Showdown? If you answered yes to literally any of those, man, just go subscribe. Help a brother out. And if you already subscribed, thank you. I appreciate that so much. Go leave a like down there instead. Comment down below what you think the most interesting tiering change we got is. I'm going to talk about, obviously, all the drops, all the rises, and we're going to also look at some of the potential, like, sets we could see out of the rises. I'm just going to add them into here. Got a nice little box started up, so we could do that. As you can see as well, this is set to loop, so if it doesn't loop, it ain't on me. So, we can start with the rises, because that's how we always do this. And we got all the way up here, Rhyperior going up to UU, which is actually a bit of an interesting change, because if you pay attention to the UU metagame thread, Rhyperior is actually starting to fall off in UU. It's actually like not that same level of great that it used to be for checking Zapdos, because, and even Torn T, because there's just been other mons that have risen to kind of do the same thing. Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to talk about which of these mons are actually rising up, but the point is Rhyperior isn't the same like incredible Gloomon that it had like kind of been turning into, and so it's probably not going to drop back to NU, because if you were paying attention to the usage stats, it actually has enough usage to beat RU. So it is going to fall to RU if it ever falls out of UU. But, which is kind of an interesting thing to note, as you may remember in the video that we did a few days ago, where I used some Swords Dance Rhyperior in NU. I talked about how this Pokemon really hasn't, despite being so good in NU the whole time, it's never truly taken off as a great, you know, on a majority of teams type guy, because the ground type competition had for so long been so stout, especially when the mons you're having to justify a slot over are like Flygon and Crocodile. Crook being probably the main one, although Flygon kind of had the same offensive rocker set that would, you know, kind of contend with what Rhyperior wants to do. It was just always really hard for the mon to really establish itself in the meta, despite being recognized by everyone as a great mon. So, kind of curious to see if it ever does fall back to NU. I'm not anticipating it does, but in the future, maybe it will. How does that end up changing its time if it drops back in, okay, now Crocodile's gone. Maybe even Flygon's gone. Maybe that mon rises up to RU at some point. I think it's interesting to think about, but obviously we'd be several months out from that happening. So we go down. And now all these mons minus Magnezone, we kind of knew were going to rise. And even Magnezone was a mon that was getting a lot of extra usage in RU. Okay, so this is just the June stuff. So like if we want to look in here for Magnezone, we should see it relatively high up because of how usage works. Okay, no, it's like barely here. So unless this is cumulative use, which I don't think it is. Huh. Oh, also, you can actually see here, Rhyperior also barely would have risen anyway to RU, so maybe it just always drops in the future. But you even see Quag is getting up there in use. Talonflame was already getting a good amount of use, and they just lost Moltres. I'm gonna put it this way, next shift, which is in October, is also gonna be pretty terrible for NU, if you want to argue for, like, losing Cruciamons, but that's beside the point. Crook rises. This is one of our best Scarfers, and just a generically really good Stealth Rock setter, with the Black Glasses set that it ran a lot. But it's another mod where it's kind of similar to Magnezone that I'm really glad is leaving, because I felt Crook was borderline kind of OP, mostly for the bulk up set. I felt bulk up Moxie Crocodile had a very easy time running through teams, I thought, as a sweeper. There really wasn't a lot that you had to dodge for that mon to run down a team and just win. Because realistically, you were worried about like Colbur Slowbro, and that was really it. And even then, I'd argue the main thing you were more worried about was getting your scale shot boost. Once you secured the speed boost, you were pretty safe. Now, that's always the issue with 2-turn setup sweepers, right? You need more than just 1 turn of setup to become the apex threat that you're hyped up to be. And it's why some of these mons don't get banned, because you're like, okay, well, yeah, you become an incredibly scary mon, but you don't do that immediately like maybe a Shell Smasher does. So why do I care, you know? As long as I don't give you 2 turns to do what you're trying to do, then it's fine, because that's, you know, that's just easier to prevent. If you need multiple turns, that gives me multiple turns to reposition, it gives me multiple turns to attack you as well. I've got more breathing room, and it's just a lot easier to play against. So I think that's part of why Crook wasn't like truly OP. But also, you know, you're looking at mons like Manchow that are super common that would always exist to just still threaten it. And then if you were running Terra Dragon with loaded dice for the extra scale shot damage, well, that was just always a little easier for Shao to deny you. You still had the Terra, and if you had a bulk up on the first turn, yes, you would be able to potentially beat Shao. But we also had other Crook sets, and I think those are the ones that kind of pushed the bulk up set over the hypothetical line. I'm trying to think of the word. Disregard me. Over the edge for me. You had those sets that would go like Terra Poison with Lumberry instead. And that gives you more room against Slowbro, for example, where you can try and bulk up some. Slowbro comes out, you can maybe Terra knock, and even if they scald you and get the burn, you just heal that off. Also, of course, it gives you more room against fighting types like, again, Mienshao, where now I have my Terra, I can even bulk up a second turn versus you, and then scale shot the next turn, and I just say, basically, okay, I'm not using scale shot for damage with this set. Instead, I'm just using it to get the speed boost when I need it. And then once I get to +2, I'm fine against a Pokemon like, say, Flygon, that will just knock it upside the head. Same thing with Noivern. Knock it upside the head, and it won't matter. So, Magnezone also rises, as I said. Very annoying mon. I thought Spec Zone was really, really oppressive, because if you look at our VR, which I did take all the mons that rose off, but it doesn't really matter for this case. A lot of Spec Zone counterplay kind of came down to having, like, Pert. And even then, Pert was taken a lot from things like Tri-Attack or non-terastallized Terra Blast. You had, like, Gastro, who's just super, super uncommon right now, is another potential check. Something like Rotom Heat, which, again, just if you had neutral coverage for, you did a ton of damage, too. You had your Umbreons of the world, which you just get Volt Switched on repeatedly. Quag has just not got the special bulk, so again, a move like Tri-Attack actually was doing quite a lot. Even Flash Cannon on the Switch, thanks to Analytic, would do a lot. The Mon didn't really have a lot of great, solid, like, consistent defensive answers to it. And then, of course, you had the healthier side of it with Assault Vest Zone, where Assault Vest Magnezone was still quite strong, but the damage wasn't super unfair, and instead the Mon provided a very, very good glue option, where you had your good steel type, some breaking power, because, again, it's a Magnezone, it's really strong, and it's still pretty hard to switch around. And you also had pivoting in one. So you think about, like, replacements to Magnezone, nothing does that all in one slot, right? Not at least with the same defensive profile. But Magnezone Rising does give room to other steel types in the tier now. And I think in general, too, this applies to, like, Reuniclus and Slowbro Rising. A lot of the other steel types were worse off because they were such food for these mons. Or just in Magnezone's case, they were worse options. So look at, like, Registeel now. Registeel is going to benefit a lot from Magnezone Rising, because Zone could potentially try to do the Iron Press stuff as well, if you really wanted to. Or it could be like Terra Fairy or Ghost, and just straight up deny Registeel when it was boosting from really making the same type of progress it would want to do. And then, of course, these guys, I shouldn't really have to elaborate on why they would shut down a Registeel, right? So it does help a lot for some of these other steel types that they don't have to deal with a mon that was just so much better than them now. And we could even talk about these two before we go to Noivern, because, like, they were more prevalent parts of the meta. Slowbro kind of shut down every other bulky setup sweeper in the tier, if we're being honest. You had, like, if you want to count Oricorio Pom Pom as a bulky setup sweeper, since it ran more defensive UV spreads, yeah, that's a fun counterpoint. Even then, Slowbro had a decent matchup. like Psyshock Slowbro was still a thing we saw in the very ending days of its tenure in Inu, and that just beat Oricorio Pom Pom. If you got the Calm Mind edge, like if you Calm Minded up, for example, as Pom Pom switched in, you were winning that 1v1. Unless they were like Taunt, Terra, Steel, you were winning that 1v1. And fortunately for the Slowbro users, most of Oricorio was buying into the coverage instead of the taunt usefulness. So you would always have a pretty advantageous matchup versus Pom Pom so long as you could get the Calm Mind before Pom Pom really went off. Meanwhile, Reuniclus, Assault Vest Reuni was pretty good glue for the tier, but it's not really something I care about losing that much. It's kind of just whatever, you know. I wasn't a huge Reuniclus spammer. I think losing Calm Mind Reuni and OTR Reuni is maybe going to be felt a little bit more, because Offensive Trick Room Reuniclus was really good to dunk on offense teams. You even saw that hyper offense build that Tier Acid was using a lot. They were consistently using OTR Reuni on it because it just gave you such an edge in the offense matchup. He paired it with an OTR Deancy as well, so that it wasn't like, oh, one of my guys goes down, or I guess in this context, oh, my Reuniclus goes down, and now I just have a ton of fast mons, and my Trick Room's still up. This sucks. No, you have the Deancy to fall back on. So I just think that's kind of annoying if you're looking for an edge in the offense versus offense matchup. But I think realistically, it's not like detrimental to the tier really to lose any of Reuni. It's more just, it goes back to the whole point of these two mons with their calm mindsets were really good at stunting on some of the more passive, generally useful defensive mons that the tier had. Especially since, again, Reuni had Magic Guard, so you couldn't Toxic it, and then Slowbro was most frequently Terra Poison. So you look at him on like Umbreon, for example. Umbreon was definitely worse in the tier due to Slowbro's presence, at least in part. Even if, in a way, Umbreon was nice to force the Terastallizing out of Slowbro, you know, that only does you so much good as the Umbreon user if the Slowbro doesn't care, or cares about, I should say, if it cares about having to Terra or not. If you've lost your mon that beats Slowbro post-Terra, well, it doesn't really do you any good to force the Terra later. You know, at that point, it's a net positive. But also, again, Registeel, Slowbro was a complete denier of. You literally just don't lose anything in that matchup other than, you know, T-Wave being marginally annoying. Same with, like, Reuniclus. Although Heavy Slam, I guess, was a bit more contentious in that matchup. I'm trying to think of, like, other things worth mentioning as well with Slowbro and Reuni. I think AV Reuni mostly just gives a lot of extra room to certain special breakers. You got things like Mr. Galgi, Mr. Draugalaug. That becomes a lot better in a non-AV Reuni meta. Vileplume even becomes better too. You could Sludge Bomb spam, get a poison on it, and just kind of limit it like that. But it's still a mon that kind of gave you some issues, so decent there. Same with like something like a Spec Sylveon, where you were doing a lot of damage with your Hyper Voices, so long as Reuniclus didn't Terra Steel. But at the end of the day, I mean, it was still switching into you. It could still fire off some damage, maybe even just knock your specs off and make you much easier to answer. So another mon that benefits. Something like Inteleon as well. This is where you would really feel a mon that benefits from AV Reuni leaving, because Inteleon was just going to get scouted out repeatedly. And unless you can really find your Dark Pulse damage, and hope, of course, Reuni doesn't like Terra and do something nasty to you, this helps as well. You had U-turn, so it wasn't like the biggest deal, and a lot of Inteleon weren't even running specs. It just helps, again, that one of the better, more durable special walls is gone. We talk about Thundurus as well. Another mon where it's like, I don't feel like this Rising is necessarily going to be like super impactful, but it was a good fast pivot, and it had some decent defensive utility. So whenever you lose a mon like that, it is kind of cringe. Like, you would prefer to have that in the tier because it gives you some usefulness if you're building an offense to get, you know, like ground immunity and fight resist in a Pokemon slot. Or if you're just looking for some extra speed on your balance build, right? So we do have Tornadus as a potential replacement, but Tornadus naturally has its own issues when you compare it to Thundurus in specific. If Thundurus wanted to have Thunderbolt, well, that's perfectly accurate. Tornadus does not have that same, like, super free stab attack to run unless it goes, Acrobatics. And that has its own issues of meaning you have to drop heavy-duty boots and go itemless. So, a little bit of give and take, but an Automon that you, like, can't replace. Kind of the same deal with Slowbro, where we do have Galarian Slowbro as an option that I do think people will experiment with. There are naturally issues with that because you don't resist water, but it does a lot of the same setup stuff. And you just have other bulky water types that I think are going to now rise in its place, like Vaporeon and Tentacruel. So, all that to say, yeah, PU's gonna probably feel the shift a lot harder than they did. You see how, like, 3 PU had this shift? They lost nothing and gained Pokemon. Yeah, no, that's not happening, I don't think, in, October. But it is what it is. This is why we play lower tiers. And then Noivern Rose, y'all know me, I don't really think Noivern Rising is, like, impactful for the tier beyond it being an option we had that is no longer available. But, like, as a Mon, I've been pretty out on Noivern for a while now. I don't think it was very good. Like, especially when you compare it to Talonflame. Talon just did everything better. So, like, I just didn't ever feel the need to use Noivern. It was just kind of like, why bother? The Mon is not that strong. And if you ever run Draco, oh my god, the room you see to offensive threats. If you run Hurricane as your mono attack, dear god, that just sucks. The offensive sets where they went like Draco, Flame Roost, Defog, I didn't love at a point. It's like, I really want U-turn on this Mon, man. And it felt like there were too many Mons that scouted you out even. You could just switch around what you were trying to do. It always felt like Noivern had like some very profound issues going against it. And then you talk about defensively again, compared to Talon. I mean, I'm just not as bulky. That might be capped. They might actually be about as bulky as each other. Noivern, 80, 85, 80, Talonflame. Yeah, you know, Noivern technically a little bulkier. But I think the reason I felt that it wasn't as bulky, you know, Flame Body. Flame Body just made Talonflame feel artificially bulkier, because you get that burn and it's like, okay, well, now I'm safe. Noivern couldn't do the same thing. But, like I said, it just still sucks to lose an option. But we'll move on. Now we get the Pokemon that dropped, and of course one of them's Araquanid. I saw some people say this might be a buff to Webs. I don't actually know if it is, because Galvantula is so valuable, I believe in large part due to the speed. And it's not exactly a slouch offensively either. Compound Ice Thunder is like very nice to be able to throw off. You've got Pounce as well for some anti-offense. Because if, you know, certain Mons try to counter lead you, you could always speed drop them, and it's like not the end of the world. Araquanid having more bulk is probably going to be the biggest benefit to it over Galvantula. And you try to think about like a lead set, I don't know, something like Leech Life. I don't know what the last move would be. I mean, I guess you could run Endeavor. I guess you could also run Pounce. You could run Mirror Coat if you want to try and hit a special attacker. It's kind of rough because this Mon's coverage is not what I would prefer to as good. Maybe an Infestation just for some chip. What was RU running? I see. Box sets, Araquanid. Ah, there's nothing there. So RU didn't even have a sample for me to look at, it turns out. Crazy. I don't know, Terra Ghost, maybe Focus Sash, and then like we said, Endeavor, because it's there. And then you just go offensive Araquanid. I don't know, let me cook, man. Something like this could be an alternative web setter. I saw someone talk about Choice Band Arac as well. I don't think that sounds good at all. Even though Water Bubble is so strong, I think we're about to see a bit of a renaissance of some of our water immunities, like Toxicroak and Vaporeon. And even, Gastrodon. Leech Life might do more than I'm anticipating it doing to some of those Mons, but I think at the end of the day, Araquanid is not going to be that important to the tier. I kind of anticipate it falling to PU. So, we'll see if I'm right. But, I have no clue yet. Breloom fell. This is a very weird Mon to see in NU, because this Mon historically has always been like OU or even UUBL. And now it's down here. And you got like... Okay, is it because it's not NU that I'm playing? It's gotta be because it's not NU, right? Yeah, it's gotta be that's not NU. So like, you got these sets right here. I'm just gonna probably do this for some of this. If I don't feel like I'm copy pasting a set into my builder, you just look over here. So we got like a Banded Breloom as an option we could see. And I do think that would be a pretty scary wall breaker for the context of NU. Because our fighting checks all fold to the varying coverage of the Luminator. Outside of maybe like Vileplume. As you see, the Mon doesn't naturally have any coverage for Plume. Unless it wants to tech like God. I mean, we already see Terra type Fire here. If you want to go Terra Blast Fire. Because even the poison types, you know, it's going to get beat down by Bulldoze. Talonflame gets hit by Rock Tomb. Psychic types, I just don't think we really have any that are bulky enough to take this on. Maybe Cresselia. As y'all saw, we got Cress and DOD. Those could probably take it on decently well. But, I feel like Seed Bomb's still going to pressure them really effectively and just force them to burn a lot of their recovers. So like Swords Dance, I actually feel like maybe a little more manageable because at that point, Breloom is taking turns boosting, and that just gives you a little more room to play around it. So if Breloom goes for a Swords Dance, I get a turn to potentially bring out my Talonflame on that. And then it has to care about me Brave Birding, unless, for example, maybe their Sash SD could definitely be a set that Breloom runs just to help reduce a bit of the offensive counterplay. But I think overall this mon's going to be really good. I don't know about Broken. On paper, definitely a super scary breaker. But then you look at the stats, you're like, okay, well, it's not that fast. It's really frail. Grass Fighting isn't really selling me defensively. I think the nice-ish thing would at least be you're not, like, super inherently weak to common revenge killers that, you know, aren't named Talonflame, right? Think about our Scarfers. It's like Mienshao, you could definitely just hit with a Mach Punch. Flygon probably tanks Mach. I think Shao does as well, mind you. But if you're boosting, they probably both just die. You think about like other Scarfers in the tier 2, it's like, first of all, what even do you have? Like Monkey Dory, I guess, could be a bit of a threat there. So you should be okay on that front. Something like Serena, just if you're running offensive Serena, you are faster than Loom. Nice 72 base speed. So you have triple Axle, you could pick it off like that, and you're immune to Mach Punch, so you wouldn't have to worry about getting popped by that. Something like Tornadus again that I mentioned earlier, faster and could have acrobatics to smoke this thing's pack. I think there's definitely inherent counterplay in the tier. We'll see how good it ends up being. Except Cresselia, and I already know like a whole bunch of new NU players from like last gen saw Crest drop and they immediately had like a heart attack. And yeah, I mean, it's just these sets right here. Obviously EVs could change, but Combine Cresselia is going to scare a lot of people because the whole worry was this gen, Crest has the ability to Terra. Oh my god, it was already so unkillable last gen. Now it's going to be even more unkillable. There are a couple things to note with Cresselia. One, it still has to rely on 8 power point recovery. This, funny enough, isn't actually a nerf for it compared to Slowbro. Because Crest doesn't have the access to those like moves like Recover or Slack Off. It's just always been stuck with Moonlight. So it literally the same deal, right? If anything, you just have to worry about a weather, like Rain maybe being what you run into. And in Rain being like, okay, well now your Moonlight heals even less. Good luck. Otherwise, Crest got some base stat nerfs this generation. So as you see here, 120, 110, 120 is actually lower than what it had in Gen 8, where it was 120 defense, 130 special defense. I don't actually know how much that impacts Cresselia, but it is definitely still going to be felt when you're trying to take these like large hits, these big damage hits. Looking for just an opportunity to set up. It's not going to be as easy as it used to be. So I think there's going to be a little bit more room to play around Cresselia, hopefully. Because, I mean, again, defensively, Crest has a lot of cool stuff going for it, so I'd like for it to be balanced. Difference between it and, like, Slowbro/Ryuni. Big thing will be a bit more reliance on Terra, I think. And that's more in comparison to Reuniclus. Slowbro, we saw, had to Terra Poison a lot to dodge Toxics. You see here again, Crest Terra Poison, so it's probably going to have to do that as well. You've also got Blacker Regenerator. That's going to be, of course, more in comparison to Slowbro, but Slowbro always had, like, a surplus of healing. And then you can still compare it to Reuniclus, where having Magic Guard made it a little bit less worried about passive chip damage. Crest still has Levitate, so that's going to do a lot of heavy lifting for it, too, so you're at least immune to spikes. You only have to fear about Stealth Rock damage, but it's at least a slight advantage to Reuni and a massive advantage to Slowbro that it constantly switch in, do some stuff early on, and then just, switch out and get all its health back. I think Crest just inherently offers a little bit less utility compared to those other Pokemon, and is also a lot more limited in terms of, like, scope of sets. It doesn't really have a lot that it's going to be able to do at, like, a super effective level compared to the other guys. Like, you've got something like Trick Scarf, right? We saw that last gen. Cress could probably still try it again this gen, dump a trick onto something like, say, a Registeel, or even a Copper if you want, and that'll at least give you some more breathing room versus them when you're considering them as checks. But how impactful or how like effective those sets are is yet to be determined. And we talk about like Cress, of course. Coverage-wise, you've got Moonblast. You've actually got a lot of moves. It's more just like how many of these moves are actually ones you want to run. I think there are definitely a lot of mons that are going to punish Cress for having to rely on such weak coverage overall. Something like Incineroar even could just boost up versus Cress, and Cress is just... This is really the big thing. 75 special attack when you compare it to Slowbro, starting with 100. When you compare it to Reuniclus, starting with 125. It takes longer for this mon to become a threat. So, all this to say, I don't actually know if it's going to be broken. It's going to be a mon that we all have to have our eye on. Like, obviously. Because, dear God, I mean... the mon is bulky as hell. It's also fast. That's going to be one of the big advantages it gets. Because, you know, don't just talk about the negatives. What does it have as a positive? It is really nice that you can run some speed on this mon. And although you were doing that on Slowbro as well, you're naturally faster than all the mons Slowbro was trying to speed creep, right? So Cress has an even larger pool of mons. You start out speeding some of these wall breakers. Like, okay, you're worried about Incineroar. Well, I could hit all the way up to here for speed. And then I'm faster than even Jolly Incent, right? In fact, okay, I was going to say, this is even faster. That's going to be bout speed and base. Okay, it says Hoopa Unbound. I feel like that's base 80s or something. 216. Yeah, it's base 80. So, like, what if you were running that much speed on a Cress? Yeah, I'll run a ton of mons. At the expense of some bulk, sure, but he's still super bulky. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out for Cress. And just how oppressive that makes people feel it is. Because, I mean, hell, here's Chandelure. That would be a mon maybe you'd be incentivized to try to outspeed. So that's cool. Deoxys-Defense is also a mon. Now, this is actually a mon where I think the comparisons to Slowbro and Reuni hit even harder. Because obviously, obscene bulk once again, and also really good speed. And you just max out your HP. This is a mon where I feel like actually going for speed is a lot more advantageous than defense. The thing just being, you already have such high base defenses that with how EVing works, you don't get rewarded as much for investing further into these. So DOD is probably going to want to make use of it. Hey, I got base 90 speed. I could probably just say, okay, this is high enough already. Invest in speed, try to outspeed some mons like Cress is going to maybe want to do. You could even go, like, again, if you want to just invest the same spot that Cress hits, go, like, to here, and then maybe, something like that. Something like that for, not IVs, for EVs could definitely be beneficial. But where DOD feels the hits compared to Cress is Recover actually is this thing's recovery. So it did get hurt by the nerf. And so if you're trying to run, like, a set like this, you know, like Demon DOD, well, again, we talk about how this is going to be reliant on a lot of turns going well for it. This is even worse because there's so many more barriers. Like, we can make this comparison because these are both pretty fast psychic type bulky setup sweepers. I guess I could even throw in the Terra types. I think both are going to want Terra Poison. Where DOD's going to struggle is, again, this issue of its coverage. It has the moves, just like Cress does. I mean, again, like, look at all these random-ass moves it learns. It even gets Nasty Plot if you wanted to run that. But Cress, I just feel like benefits so much more from the defenses being very balanced. And as a result, I don't feel like it needs the coverage as much. Or I feel like the coverage is just a lot more, like, easy for it to do. DOD, I feel like it's going to be more incentivized to try and make use of pressure. I feel like I'm literally just getting off track right now. Let me refocus my mind real quick. My take of it is pretty much just this. I think Cress is just so much more incentivized to run like this, Moonblast, Moonlight, than DOD is, because Cress is going to be harder for you to passively overwhelm. At the end of the day, you've got better defenses. I don't actually know if the defenses end up being better based on like hits taken, but bear with me for a moment. You've got Levitate as well, so you don't actually care about spikes. DOD, on the other hand, is pressure. It's going to be incentivized to try and take as many turns as possible to set up because it wants to try and punish you with its ability. And it also doesn't really want to have to keep switching in and out. At the very least, if there were to be a positive comparison to be made from Crest to Slowbro, it could be that DOD at least has a little bit more room to switch in and out because it's not taking Spike's chip. This mon is! And again, you only have 8 power points. So, compared to Crest, which at least you're immune to most every hazard, DOD's not. I don't want to have to take turns trying to switch into random moves, risk getting hit by knockoff and losing my lefties, and then having to just burn through all these recovers. Like, that doesn't sound very good. So, then we could take, like, okay, well, what if we still decide, does this even get Moonblast? It doesn't. This is probably also going to be a bit of a hang-up, where there's no great 2-move coverage. It does get Psychic Noise, if I'm remembering right. So you could try, like, Calm Mind, Psychic Noise, and then, God, the coverage here is... It's weird. It learns so many good moves, but I feel like the coverage is still terrible. This is ass, bro. I don't know. What even are you doing for another coverage? Wait, yo, it gets Teleport? That's kind of fun. That's actually pretty fun. Yeah, so as I said, coverage. I don't know, maybe Ice Beam, because it's a good move. Maybe Knock Off, and you just say, alright, I'm going to have some utility early on with Knock, and then I can still have even Psychic Noise to throw off, but I've got the threat of Calm Mind in the back. Maybe try something like this. It's very tough to say with DOD as a defensive setup sweeper just how good it could be. I think Press is just pretty obviously better. Now, if you want to talk about sets where DOD should have pretty good success. Oh, here's also a pure utility set, by the way. So, I was actually kind of theorizing this in my head. I was like, hey, could pure utility work on this? Because it gets hazards, recover, knock off, like that's all really good, and it does still have Nightshades. I was even going to ask, I was like, does it get Seismic Toss / Nightshade anymore? The answer is yes. So, maybe you try that, but I was even just thinking this. And since I don't see the set, I'm just put this stuff in here. Y'all know where we're going with this. Just straight up dual hazards. Now, why not Focus Sash? Well, this mon's never getting one-hit KO'd, so you may as well have red card to force things to switch out. And you could do, like, knock off just to, you know, maybe remove some random boots if you need to. And then last move, maybe, like, Nightshade, just to have a little consistent damage. And you just go, like, boom, bang, boom. I could see this being pretty good. We already understand that NU is a very offense-dominated tier. We'll see how it feels like after the tiering changes, but offense is, like, super, super dominant still. Like, it's still a really good type of build to run with, so I don't anticipate it getting worse out of nowhere. Something like this could enable a lot of new mods, especially one of the ones we got, and what I actually kind of skipped over, given we were going alphabetical. Cinccino. Now, Cinccino, a little bit, cringe in a way. I don't know if Skill Link or Loaded or Technician's better, probably. What did RU do? I'll just steal a set here. Yep, Technician, they were doing loaded dice. Makes a lot of sense. But something like this. It is a little bit unfortunate because you would clear your own hazards, but bear with me for a second. This kind of setup is going to be pretty good. I don't actually know about which move here. Here's the one worry. You probably want Triple Axle for Plume just to make sure you do more damage. Because I don't think at +1 you smoke Plume, right? What in the hell is happening? Get me over here. Cinccino, are you tidy up? File Plume. Can you physical wall? I want to see at +1 how much I do. And in Tail Slap, yeah, so as you can see here, this is a 4-hitter, and if you get 5 hits, you still don't KO Plume, guaranteed. So that's where you may see people wanting to run Triple Axle, because Axle actually gets the KO on Plume. So that's a pretty big difference there, and one that may be necessary to take into account. And then last move, something like Bullet Seed, maybe Knock Off. Bullet Seed just be good for like Quagsires, even Perp maybe you might need on Bullet Seed. Knock could be still useful coverage as well, just because there will be things that try to tear a Ghost in front of the Tail Slap. All this to say, Cinccino fits pretty well into this offensive meta, because it's just a good setup sweeper. This is one of the mons where I'm kind of unsure just how broken or balanced it'll be. Because there's a lot of good things going for it, of course. It's really fast, and you have a speed boosting setup move. So this already makes it pretty annoying to deal with, because you're going to outspeed all the Scarfers if you get a Tidy Up off. The downside is you're still kind of weak. You've got Technician loaded dice with a lot of good multi-hit moves. So this is kind of patched up. You saw the Plume damage. I mean, Tail Slap damn near... I mean, the fact that Plume, after rocks, has like a 50-50 shot to just die to your Tail Slap, that's pretty vile. Yeah, that's pretty disgusting. But it's not that strong, and coverage is going to be a bit of an issue. Because I don't know if you could really fit Terra Blast that easily. Like, it doesn't get a move like Low Kick for Steel types. So you'd have to run... God forbid it runs Dig. But if you ran like Terra Blast Fire... Like, I don't know how easily you can do this for Pokemon like a Registeel, for example, for Pokemon like Bronzong. Like, I don't know how easily this fits into your game plan. And it may also take away some setup opportunities, because I think Terra Ghost would partly be really nice just so you could, you know, go for it versus a Mienshao. Like, if Mienshao picks off one of my Mons, and I want to, you know, switch Cinccino in and Terra as it tries to CC me again, can't really do that if I'm running Terra Blast. So there's some things to think about with Cinccino. I think it's going to be really pretty solid, but I think it may end up being a bit of a flop compared to how people are going to perceive it from just day one. It's really frail, so I don't anticipate setup chances. And again, that's kind of why I'm saying, you know, do you really want to have to run Terra Blast? Would it not just be better to have more coverage from like other options and keep the defensive Terra? We'll see. And then the last Mon, of course, you know it, you love it, you can't live without it. We're literally getting every Psychic type in the world. That's not the right one. Male Indeedee is back. Mon rose a long time ago because of Psychic Terrain being good in RU, not RU, in UU, and it finally dropped back today. So this is an interesting drop because you could see Psychic Terrain getting a bit of a buff out of this. Terra Blast, the Healing Wish still, and then like Encore, yeah, gets all these, cool. So why use this over the female one? Well, we'll bring the female one down here for comparison. I did the wrong order now. So compared to stats, of course, the female one is bulkier by some margin. I don't actually know how much the +10 in every defense matters, but it's a little bulkier, and of course at the expense of being slower, not as strong, and it doesn't have expanding moves. Where does this come in? Well, I think this Mon ends up being a much better setter as a result, because I don't think the defenses really mattered that much. I'm not sure that there was some random calc that Indeedee female was just benefiting a ton from. And I think you'll end up being able to get more mileage out of this, because again, faster and stronger. Better offensive threat. It just feels like less of a dead slot, really. Like, that's really the big thing with this. It's not as much of a dead slot for these teams, because you actually get some damn damage out of it. Where I think people would maybe argue that it's a bit worse for full terrain is, if I'm remembering right, it doesn't get the screens. Yeah, this Mon doesn't get Reflect and Light Screen, and some people do really value having a Reflect and Light Screen on Indeedee female, where it's arguably just a lateral move, is it still keeps Healing Wish at the... Well, yeah, it still keeps Healing Wish. That's really it. And Healing Wish is debatably, like, the most important part, because you can bring back someone like an Iron Thorns, or any other non-unburdened sweeper, and you give them that second chance to sweep, and that maybe is going to be more valuable in certain games, or even like a Cloyster, where it's arguably a benefit to have this Mon, is what we're talking about, where it's just a better attacker. And Indeedee female, in a lot of battles, it felt like it was just kind of there to set the terrain. Sometimes that's all you needed it for, and that's where you'd argue, okay, well, Indeedee female's just fine. It's arguably better because it's bulkier and it has better supportive tools. I don't need it to do damage. I just need the terrain up. Well, there are going to be some instances where you actually want to do damage with this Mon, and having both expanding force and just more special attack lends you to doing that. It's going to be a lot better as a breaker, which I think is going to appeal to some people. And I was talking a bit in the Discord, and Mr. Phantom Mystics, he was even saying, yeah, maybe for like semi-terrain, you will always want to use this Mon because it's going to be stronger, and you want just on that type of team, if it's not full terrain, you maybe want a Mon that has a little more use outside of just, you know, going me set Psychic Terrain me support Unga Unga. So, I think it's an interesting drop. I don't know if it really brings Psychic Terrain, though, back into the meta. I kind of feel like Grassy Terrain would be the better terrain at this point. Although, you won't catch me dead using that. But that's kind of where my perspective is on it at this point. But yeah, this is the tier shift. I hope y'all enjoyed. Real quick, Copperajah dropping and Raikou dropping. This just really is the matter if the latter doesn't use either of them. Raikou, I think, is pretty bad, but Copperajah, I believe, is like pretty clearly an Inu level Pokemon. We'll see if it rises back up in the future. I frankly have no clue if it will, but it's something that definitely should, in my eyes. But like I said, hope y'all enjoyed. Comment down below, what's your favorite tiering change? It could even be a rise. If you're glad something left the tier, a lot of people will probably say Slowbro. Let me know down below. I'll catch you next time, though. Peace.